First of all, if you wouldn't mind, just some appreciation for a woman who found herself working day and night from the moment she got back from the World Forum in England, and has done a fabulous job of putting this together. So some appreciation for Alison Hewitt, please. Well, I'm now going to call her the long-suffering Alison. She leads the SiG MaRS program here, for those who don't know. And for those who don't know what SiG MaRS is, and that's possible, or it supports social entrepreneurs and promotes social innovation under the Advise, Convene, and Accelerate slogan. And Alison put this together with Ian Myrons from our shop. I will also say hello to Tanya Carnegie, who is the National Director of Community Leadership at KPMG. She is responsible for the firm-wide corporate citizenship and sustainability strategy encompassing KPMG's relationship with the community through volunteerism, philanthropy, and sponsorships. Also a chartered accountant and an MBA. Tanya Sermon is the co-founder and executive director and social and human whirlwind of the Center for Social Innovation, whose mission is to catalyze, inform, and support social mission projects that use collaborative and entrepreneurial strategies. She has been the partnership director of the Canadian Partnership for Children's Health and the Environment, a senior partner in the Commons Group, founding business manager for Rabble.ca, and executive director of Web Networks as well. And community bonds is something that she has brought to the table very successfully in expanding the reach and capacity of CSI. And finally, the man who they describe as the godfather of soul, ladies and gentlemen. So he'll collapse at one point and we'll have to help him off the stage. Then he'll run back on again. Tim Broadhead is President and Chief Executive Officer of the J.W. McConnell Family Foundation. And prior to joining the foundation, Executive Director of the Canadian Council for International Cooperation, representing over 120 nonprofit Canadian international development agencies, and is the visionary behind the SiG National Network. So welcome them all. So I tell you what, we'll hear from each of you separately, and then we'll have a conversation and some questions and answers from the group, and then we'll have a report back on some wiki input, and Minister Broughton will be here to wrap up the event at the end. So why don't we start with Tim Broadhead?
Well, why don't we start by clarifying that I'm not the godfather of soul, I'm the grandfather of rap. We're the rappers, but we're going to talk in prose, I think. Except maybe Tanya. So grandfathers have one great advantage. We can listen to them forever while I reflect back 10, 15, 20, 30 years on the history of social innovation. No, actually, I'm just going to mention that, you know, we've talked a lot today about fast and slow, and the importance of paying attention to deep change, slow change. But I have to say, the discourse around social innovation has been incredibly fast. You know, 5 years ago, Canada was a real laggard. When we talked about social innovation, we inevitably, you know, referred back to Jeff Mulligan at the Young Foundation or Jeff Skoll or others. But what we've seen today is we don't have to go offshore. Some people are talking about Ontario as the new Silicon Valley of social innovation. We've made huge progress. We've made huge strides with policymakers through the work of Social Innovation Generation, through the work of MaRS, a number of other organizations. People have been brought in. We've had conversations at the provincial and federal levels. A lot has happened in British Columbia through the work of Al Admansky and the Plan Group. We've made enormous progress also with the private sector, which we used to think was behind some kind of impenetrable wall. And what we've discovered, and particularly perhaps through the Social Finance Task Force and some of the related activities, is that there is growing interest. And there's a real take-up, as I'm sure we'll hear from Tanya. Also with academics. Someone mentioned that in a lot of business schools now you have terrific interest in the topics we've been discussing today, especially driven by students. And finally, of course, and this is of no surprise to the people in this room, most of us anyway, there has been incredible pickup in the community. Not that this is new in the community, it's just that putting a name on it and recognizing where it happens and recognizing the problems, the barriers, the obstacles, as well as the extraordinary examples of successful social innovations that have taken place. This is new. Getting the story out is a little bit new. I think if we were to use those of you who are familiar with Buzz Hollings and the Panarchy cycle, we're in the 1,000 flowers blooming stage. We're trying a lot of things. We haven't got a model yet, but the very questions that we were looking at during the course of the day indicates that there's an openness now to bring up some of the suggestions and some of the activities people have been engaged in to see how they could be made more systemic. But I think it's important for us to go back to Rick's words first thing this morning, that when we talk about social innovation, we're not principally talking about incremental changes. We're not talking about just tweaking systems so that they perform more effectively or more efficiently. We're talking about big change. And it's no particular surprise, I think, that we're not very good at it yet. We don't quite know how to make it happen. We don't think, our education system doesn't help us to think in terms of how systems operate. The notion of complexity, which we are all hearing more and more about, actually is, for most of us, it's a different way of thinking. And although we use the language, these are not intellectual constructs that we learned in school. These are things that we're picking up now as we have a better understanding of how the world actually works. And of course, when you start thinking in terms of systems, you understand how we're all part of those systems. And that's why I think when Roz and others have said that the first step is a recognition that we can't simply say, you know, this is a problem for government to resolve, or this is really the private sector's role. When you're part of a system, you understand the interrelationships and the connectivity. And it helps us to move away from the cliche, the phrase that we've all used, you know, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem, towards a different formulation of that, which is, it's because we recognize that we're all part of the problem that we have a right to participate in creating the solutions. And that takes us all out of our comfort zone. It takes us away from looking at the roles that people have historically played and saying that's not where I fit, and saying, well, no, actually we have to devise ways in which we can work together. So what are the systemic or the large system-changing ideas that I've heard today? I think the whole issue of how we identify resources and mobilize resources. The work of the task force, the work of the social venture exchange that Adam presented this afternoon, those are system-changing ideas. We're not there yet, but we're embarked on the path. A lot of the policy work that's going on, it also has enormous implications. The idea that the minister, it's not an idea, it's a challenge that the minister has thrown to us to participate in creating Ontario's policy around social innovation, that potentially is a system-changing idea, because if it works in this domain, it can be applied and tried elsewhere as well. I think a third system-changing idea is what we've heard from Cheryl and others regarding the program at Waterloo, trying to actually develop a set of tools and skills that make people more effective at recognizing and supporting innovation and creating teams that work across sectors. And finally, I think the whole idea of change labs, which is being experimented with in Europe, and increasingly I think it's coming up in Canada. or perhaps the regional innovation centers that, as we heard this morning, are now going to be opened up to the social sphere. These, I think, also are, this also is a potentially system impacting idea. So there have been a number of ideas that I think are the ones that are going to really I'm going to take from here today. But I want to just mention one last thing. When we talk about social innovation, there's a tendency, I think, on all of our parts to reify it. Social innovation in and of itself. And we need to remember, this is just a means. What we're trying to do is to address societal challenges that are not responding to the institutions and the conventional ways of addressing them. Social innovation is an attempt to find a new way to address it. And we have to not fall into the trap of so many other concepts. And I just, to cite one example, microfinance. You know, microfinance was an interesting idea, and then it became the solution to global poverty. And now it's being utterly discredited because of some problems taking place in some countries. So we have to be careful not to create out of social innovation this huge all-embracing term. Lastly, because I like Ross's idea that one should add a little poetry, I didn't, unfortunately, bring a poem along, and I love Ben Okri, but I think I'll add for cultural diversity a comment that Percy Bysshe Shelley made, which was, this was in his work, A Defense of Poetry, 1821. We need the creative faculty to imagine that which we know and the generous impulse to create that which we imagine.
Thank you, Tim. Tanya Carnegie.
Great. So pleased to be part of today. And when I think about all of the discussions and conversations and ideas that have come out through the course of the past few hours, there's two key themes that really stand out for me. You know, talking about cross-sector partnerships and the role of the corporate sector. And then also something that Minister Hoskin said this morning about social innovation being driven by people and communities. So just starting with the cross-sector partnerships, I mean, I think what we've heard today is, you know, collaboration is really critical to success. And Roz, in her comments a few moments ago, you know, said it, you know, very clearly. You know, no one has all the answers. The complexity of the issues and the interdependent relationships that we have, you know, really this isn't about anyone going at it alone, and there's so much that we can learn from one another. So it's really, how do we tap into that? And, you know, achieving social innovation, it does require new thinking. It is something very different, in particular from the corporate sector perspective. And I can speak from my experience in this. And really thinking about the value that can be co-created when you bring different actors together. And I think we've talked about, you know, four main actors throughout the course of today. We've talked about government, and we heard the minister say this morning that this is about, you know, how government can be an enabler of success and an enabler of change, not creating more red tape. It's about the role of citizens and the role of not-for-profit sector and social enterprise. And it's also about the role of corporations and the private sector. And, you know, Tony this morning talked about the opportunity for, you know, companies to drive large-scale change. And the shared value article by Porter and Kramer has been mentioned a few times. And what I'm seeing in the corporate sector is the general question about, okay, well, how do we put our head around it? And then how do we figure out what does this mean for us? And how do we figure out what's the value that we can add? What's the social value to the business that we provide? And how is it that we take that beyond philanthropy and really partner with other organizations in the community, whether that's government, not-for-profit, and how do we really create something very special here? And creating that shared vision, that shared alignment. And Roz, I think you said it, you know, so well, that this is really about building relationships, and it's got to be based on trust and really based on understanding how is it that we're going to work together and what is the goal that we're all looking to ultimately achieve. So critically important. The other thing that I heard this morning that I was really excited about, Adam was talking about corporate social innovation. And Paul had mentioned, when looking to partner with organizations, we want brains and talent and not just funding. And that was like music to my ears, because as I travel across the country and speak with colleagues internationally, one of the things that I keep hearing is, not-for-profit sector leaders are saying, we need your business acumen. We need your business skills to help us be successful. We don't necessarily need your funding, or funding's only a part of the picture. So it's really understanding how to tap into the value that the business sector has to add. It's also been mentioned about speaking a common language, which I think is so critical. And I see that coming out in two perspectives. One from a business perspective, talking about social innovation and social enterprise. It's a very new thing. So really helping to make that relatable and helping business to understand how they can be part of that. On the other hand, what I hear from the not-for-profit sector is, we really need help thinking about the operational effectiveness of what we do, and that's where we think we can tap into what the business sector has to offer. So those are two things that I put out. As far as what Minister Hoskin said this morning about people and communities, there was a comment that social innovation comes from discontent, but I also think that social innovation comes from people's genuine desire to make a difference and have an impact. And I see this creating a role for the creators of social innovation as well as the enablers of social innovation, and that creates an opportunity for everyone to participate. Which I think is really exciting. And this is something that I see in my work every day. I feel privileged to work with incredibly talented professionals, people who are very skilled at what they do professionally, but people who are also very passionate about their communities and are really highly engaged in looking at how they can make a difference. And that's really what they want to know at the end of the day, that what I do matters, and that there is an opportunity to be part of the change. And what's really exciting is they're not just thinking about what that change is that they can be part of, but they're also asking the question, and how can I get my kids involved? How can I get my families involved? Which really just drives home for me from the conversations today that there really is a role that each one of us can play, irrespective of the sector that we're in, just really as citizens of the province. There's something that we can all do. And I find that incredibly exciting.
Thank you, Tanya. I guess we'll do another Tanya then. Tanya's sermon, if you don't mind.
Thank you. It's the first time I've ever been on a panel with another Tanya. It's kind of fun. But Tim, you took all the good things I wanted to say, so ditto, and I'm done. No. It's really an honor and a delight to be here in the room with all of you here today. One of the things we didn't get a check-in on is I'd love to know, just by a show of hands, how many people here work for government? How many people see themselves working, are part of the nonprofit sector? Oh, look at you. How many people are from the business or corporate sector? Not bad, very impressive. How many people here think that, that their job or their role, in some way, they're acting as an intermediary? Interesting, eh? That's really, really exciting, really interesting for me. We've been talking about definitions all day, and I think Ralph may have said that you might have been referring to me when I said, I know it when I see it. I've got a better definition, and I want to share it with you, and I want to kind of be a little provocative as well. For me, a social innovation is a new idea for the public good. We've talked a lot about systems change. And the answer to that is yes. Social innovation is about systems change, and it requires a big rethink about how we operate as a society. But the answer is also yes, that social innovation for me is also about small enterprises, small solutions. It's about citizens taking action. It's about market transformation, and it's about replacing the old economy with the new economy. It is about incremental change, and it's about those collective incremental changes building a movement which transforms those systems. And I say this, and I think that this is really important because too often when we use the word social innovation, people feel like it's too big and that they shouldn't be included, or that it doesn't include them. And this is exactly wrong. And this is exactly why it's so exciting to have a day like today where we can have people from a whole range of different backgrounds who can all see themselves as a social innovator, whether they're inside government or outside of government, whether they're working in the citizen sector or in the corporate sector. The secret to this movement is that we all have an opportunity to be a part of the solution. And that's what's exciting, and that's why having 3 ministers come together to say the word social innovation in the same place at the same time is pretty monumental. We had a conference in this room with our friends from Toronto City Summit Alliance, Now Civic Action, Boston Consulting Group, MaRS, and the Center for Social Innovation in 2007. In this very room where we started to have this conversation. And now, 5 years later, the conversation has just come so incredibly far. You've heard a little bit about the corporate sector, institutional sector, and the big thinkers, but I guess I just really want to take a moment to talk about the real people on the ground that make this stuff happen. Last weekend, I had the incredible pleasure of visiting the Evergreen Brickworks. And I don't know if you guys have been down there, but I believe today it got awarded in the top 40 best places in the world to visit. Yeah. The social entrepreneurs need a moment to be recognized here, and I just have to call a few of them out. I know I'm not going to get the list, but it just astounds me. Social innovation is nothing but a silly concept until somebody takes it and does something with it. And so I just want to take a moment to acknowledge Petra Cooper, Tim Jones, who left, Jeff Cape, Richard Durham with Turnaround Couriers, Michelle LeBay with Options for Homes. I've got, Bill Young with Social Capital Partners, Ann Shula, Social Assets Measurement, just getting started. Ben with the journalists, I forget, Human Rights something or other. You know what, it's just an astounding story when real people on the ground can take this idea, they can take these ideas of mixing business models and social values, and they can go through the grinding work of actually figuring out how to do it. This is what makes social change. It's the folks and it's the partners that those social entrepreneurs find in business, in government, and in the institutional academic settings and within accelerators across the province and around the world. These are the ingredients that really start to make social change happen. And I guess I just want to talk a little bit about the global imperative to support this work. The Center for Social Innovation is focused first and foremost on the entrepreneur, on the social entrepreneur who's trying to make something work. We house over 300 social entrepreneurs and organizations that all share a social mission. When I take a look at the world right now, I can stand back and I go, wow, I've become a policy geek. I work with the ONN and looking at all these different policy changes that we might be able to affect. But really what it comes down to is that our world is changing. In the UK, we've got something called the Big Society. In the US, we have something called the Tea Party movement. And here in Ontario, the world is changing. We've seen it in the last federal election, and I suspect we're going to continue to see these changes. And the question is, where are you going to be in relationship to these changes? Are you going to be the effect, or are you going to have agency and be cause in your life and get ahead of this game? So I've been thinking a lot about the Big Society movement because it really speaks to the power of citizenship. It speaks to the power of local, which for me, when I take a look at the trends that are changing the world, I really see 3. The first one is market transformation, the second one is collaboration, and the third one is about the power of local and the re-engagement of citizens in solutions in our local communities. But I don't buy into the Big Society. I don't buy into the Big Society only because I don't like the word big. I would rather us replace this concept of big society with how does Ontario become a leader in small society loosely joined? How do we figure out how to harness the individual, incredible entrepreneurs and enterprises and solutions, whether they're inside social service agencies and nonprofits or inside government or institutions or academic organizations? How do we harness these good ideas, loosely connect them, so that we can, by virtue of the value of the local and the value of those citizenships, be part of enriching this ecosystem, which is already just an incredibly powerful movement for social innovation in Ontario. But how do we build those loose connections so that we really can be not about social innovation, which I agree, Tim, is just a tactic, but really about social impact, about living sustainably with respect for people and for the planet, and that we find a way to support the creation of jobs in a vibrant economy so that we can all live healthy and sustainable lives.
And finally, before we start to open this up, Alison Hewitt.
So I noticed that Twitter's gone down a lot since I've been up here. Have you noticed that? First of all, I want to thank you all very much for coming. I know how busy everyone is, and this is a whole day out of your incredibly busy day, so thank you very much for coming. So here's what I know. Collaboration is freaking hard. It is really hard, and as Tanya mentioned, getting 3 ministers in the room is remarkable. They have very busy schedules, and pulling that off was not easy. It makes it a lot easier when you like the people you're working with. In fact, it's the only thing that makes it manageable. We talked a lot about language, and yeah, we all speak jargon. So I landed here on Mars. I went to a staff meeting, and I said, I'm sorry, I should be on Venus because I have no idea what you people are talking about. It really is something we do. We exclude. And I guess we also include by creating community. But we've got to figure out, is there a role for some kind of a knowledge broker, some kind of a neutral space where people can come to test out these really big ideas? Because as Rick gave us a call to action, big is critical, it's a moral imperative, but big is scary. And I don't really know how to do big. I know how to do relentless incrementalism. That's what I've done, right? Just little tiny bits. That's what most of us have done. But I do think, and I think why social innovation is fast now, is we've begun to hit a tipping point. And Tim Drayman, a colleague in SiG National, has a slide from Google that shows the term social innovation, social enterprise. Over the past few years, it is skyrocketing. You know, if people search Google, you see the sort of the trend line. It's absolutely skyrocketing. We've hit a sweet spot. And once you hit that, you're into a bit of flow and it takes over. So let's talk about control. Are you kidding me? We have no control. But getting comfortable with that is really hard. Everybody in this room comes to this discussion with a whole different level of knowledge. Some of our folks from the regional innovation centers are like, what? We're doing social innovation? Are you kidding me? Again, they're a little bit freaked out by that because this is completely new for them. Other people, like the folks up in the room, have been doing it for quite a long time. It's intrinsic to who they are. So with that different level of knowledge, we were a bit challenged in putting together a panel, but I hope it's worked out for you. I also want to talk about the video that you saw that Tony showed this morning. So I remember when the revolution in the MENA, which I guess is the Middle East and Northern Africa region, was happening, people were giving a lot of credit to social media. And then someone like Malcolm Gladwell writes an article that says it's not about Twitter. And then people were giving credit to, of course, the vegetable seller. And people are giving credit to. I think everyone should take credit. I think that's how you get to tipping points. And I want to be able to use the marketing and language in the social purpose sector that Tony Pickett can bring to us. Woohoo. So, I mean, this is really, I think, a revolution in its own right. I wanted to pick up on something that Tanya said about, you know, until we can be treated as equals in terms of going to other tables, I think we demand to be treated as equals. And just to show my feminist roots, way back when we were talking about abortion, we used to say, you know, it's not that I believe in abortion on demand, I think a polite request should do. And now, what I think the thing is, I think we need to be in a position where we go to the table and we say, You want talent? I talk to 20-somethings. You all talk to 20-somethings. They want to make money and they want to make a difference. You want to get talent into the best organizations? You want to keep talent? You've got to be talking this way. This is not just a nice thing to do. It's the right thing to do. And you can actually make money and make a difference. I'm convinced, and it's why I'm sitting here. Roz talked a lot about the philosophy of partnership and shared leadership, and I love that. And I'm wondering if some of the stuff that she's doing around the partnering initiative can be brought to Ontario. How do we scope out the best stuff that's happening in the world and bring it here, like the SVX, which is what we're calling the Social Venture Exchange now, because the Securities and Exchange Commission doesn't want us to use the word exchange. So it's SVX, like it's code. But now you're all in the know about what it is. I also wanted to just reflect for a second. So I spent most of my life in the nonprofit sector, and yes, I could get money to do something innovative, but really when I was running a youth shelter, I needed money to feed a kid and to give them a bed for the night. And guess what? That was good enough. Giving them a bed for the night, giving them something to eat was good enough. I wasn't going to wipe out homelessness. I was just going to do that. So I think in the not-for-profit sector, we have to think about getting people fed, getting people housed, doing what we have to do, and then we've got to carve out a time the way they do in the business sector for R&D. We cannot think about R&D as something that's wasteful. We have to work with our funders to help them get that. We have to understand accountability and metrics differently, because if we don't find the space to think, if we don't find the time to bring our skills and our expertise and our resources to the table to think differently, then we're not going to get anywhere. So I think that's the call for our time, to give ourselves permission to look up from our computers and to look up from solving really challenging issues that are right in front of us, and find the time to think about how we do this differently by engaging people. And I know some of this stuff has taken people out of your comfort zones, and the more we did that, the more successful we are. Thank you very much.
All right, I'm going to, if you don't mind, I'll just pick one thing from what each of you said for you to just expand a little. Tim, Change Labs. Can you tell us a bit about Change Labs?
Well, Change Labs are, I mean, there's a variety of ways of addressing this, but it in essence, is something that we've been talking about here. You create a space where people can come, the unexpected, not the expected partners. People come from different backgrounds, but with a common interest in solving a problem, and have some resources. That space that Alison mentioned, we all have that difficulty. It's not just in the not-for-profit world. Finding a place where you can work with shared risk, and with an expectation that there are going to be failures, because that's in the nature of trying new things. So you referred to Mind Lab, for example, which is an example of a change lab, but one which is unique in that it's inside government.
Right.
These tend to be more outside various structures. And those of you who are interested, Adam Kahane has done a lot of work on this, and he's written about it. So if you want to follow up, Kahane, somebody tweet.
And he's coming here July 18th.
And he's coming here on July 18th. Well, there you are.
Perfect. All right, good. I wouldn't have, just a little stretch of that. Tanya, this one. Positive catalyst, because what was the name of the man you had me come and see?
Christian Basson?
No.
From
the States.
Filthy Rich and other nonprofit things. Not Richard's, no. I'll get there.
The guy who works in Chicago.
Yeah. John McKnight.
John McKnight.
Da, 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 da.
He was unbelievable, because one of the things he said, I'm asking because what he said was, we tend to wait for the problem. And way people present the problem is to get up at a local town hall meeting and go, you know what, I've had it. I'm sick of this crap. You guys better, and they're the most uncivil groupings of people I've ever been in, right? He said, go and find out what people love. They want to be able to get together and make music. They want to be able to spread some joy. They have a certain talent in their neighborhood. And then he took those things and he magnified them. And then people really sort of rallied around social change about making positive things work more. And we keep thinking in government, what's the problem? How do we fix it? So talk a bit about that in terms of the world you come from and how you approach that.
Absolutely. It's really exciting. It manifests itself in two different ways at KPMG. I mean, one, we're looking at, how is it that we can be a catalyst for change in the 32 communities where we operate across Canada. And it's really by going out and talking with the not-for-profit sector and understanding, well, what are the key social issues? And what is the best way that we can engage in partnership to really help drive, long-term social change? So that's how we look at it from a firm perspective, and that's a core part of our business strategy. But then from a people perspective, where I get really excited is learning about the kinds of things that our people really value and the kinds of things that they get really passionate about. And I mean, there's 5,500 of us across the country, and there's that many different things that people are passionate about. But really helping them figure out, what is that thing, and what are you good at, and how can you put the two together to really engage in a way that makes sense for you and your family to really be part of that movement. And it's incredibly exciting because what you see is deepened citizenship in communities. We see that coming into the office, where people are talking about the things that really motivate them and the change that they feel part of in their communities. And it just changes the whole dynamic. So it just gets me to thinking, well, what if every organization did that? And what if every citizen of this province, of this country, felt that way and felt that engaged? And what would this country look like?
There's companies that have their employees once a week or twice a month go and do volunteer work, and they find their people come back and contribute way more to the company because they feel human. They're not just going to work, going home, going to work, going home. So,
Well, and the way we've done it is we've actually incorporated that as part of everyone's performance management. So it's something that every single person at the firm is responsible for doing. Right. So they set their own path. But we said, you know what, this is really the kind of firm that we want to operate. This is the kind of culture that we want to create, that culture of active citizenship, where people feel like they can really talk about the kinds of things that they do. So I've got a great role in really helping to cultivate that kind of culture.
Should do that in government, I think, including the politicians. Let's talk a bit about that localized idea that you have, that localized, because, there was the great idea of Active Green and Ross, which is a national idea, and sometimes you think, what a great idea, we should be able to do it across the country. Talk about the tension between that and being local.
When we start to, I have a big problem with the concept of scale. I think that there's this assumption that many of us have in society that bigger is better. And I think that that is actually at the root of what is wrong with our society. And I think it's hard, really hard, particularly as somebody who is ambitious and respects ambitious, successful, scaled, the idea, the respect that comes with bigger is better. And yet, when I look around the world and I think about the things that I enjoy as a human being and the kind of connection that I get in my life, I'm amazed at how it really is the artisanal, it's the small, it's the human, it's the happiness. And I guess one of the things that I see is in this trend, it's this sort of third trend of this confluence of the concept of local, artisanal, and happiness. And this is a concept, this is a social innovation concept that we might aspire to happiness. That it's not always that our bottom line is better, or even that the social impact is always there. But what about the question of, my motto in life is I want to make social change and have fun doing it. It's this balance of product and process. And I think that increasingly as we see, looking at the kind of communities that you're talking about, Tanya, more and more people are looking for meaning in their life. And this question of what does meaning look like? And how do we honor and value the small, the local, within the context of the global? And how do we lean into what makes local communities so distinct? I don't want to go to Paris and drink Starbucks. But that's what happens, right? This is this challenge. I want to go to Paris and I want to be enamored with the Parisian experience. And so one of the things that I think we have to really grapple with, and it kills me, it's probably been the hardest internal tension that I've ever had to deal with on a personal level, is this, we could take the Center for Social Innovation and we could franchise it. It could be done tomorrow. right? I mean, not tomorrow. It's always harder than you think. But you know, there's always the business model is there to do that. And this concept that, you know, scale is the goal. And you know, and I guess one of the things that I've been really struggling with, and you know, I had the opportunity to meet with the STOPS board of directors recently, where we were having a really interesting conversation about this question of what does impact look like, and how do we differentiate impact from this scale question, and how do we start to understand that maybe shining the jewel is just as important as an inspiration, and that the impact of that inspiration may have more opportunity to change the world than the idea that one corporation owns it, or so it's just, for me, it's a really important question of what's important, and that as we grapple with the question of what does social innovation look like in our own organizations, that we reflect on what's important to us as human beings, and we remember and really consider what kind of life do we want to live as we co-create these innovations. Because I personally think that there's great synergy there, and I think that, just finally, local is the best market opportunity, right? Like, so one of the things that I like to think about is where's the vertical, what are the business verticals with the most traction? And I think, in fact, that the power of local, you can't outsource your hairdresser, right? You can't move your mechanic to China. So there's certain things and functions in our world, and and us rebuilding our relationship with local and with our local communities, I think, is a great market opportunity.
I was in France last week, actually, with my family, and I was in a supermarket in and of itself in rural France where we were. That's something, Carrefour supermarket. So was there, and the big thing they were selling in the lobby on the way in was American-style refrigerators. Right? Because we have much bigger refrigerators than they have in Europe, and the people shop daily, and not anymore. Now they're doing what we do. They're buying warehouse food and shoving it in warehouse fridges and having 30% of it rot in the back. So they're just like us now. Marketing.
Stay home.
Let's talk the bad word, marketing.
Sure.
The dirty word of marketing. Because I did have a sort of vibe when Tony was talking of, you know, a good 30% of the room going, whatever. So, talk about marketing.
Sure. So, can I just start with something Tanya said, though? I just want to riff off that for a second, Mr. Jazz Guy. I think we should get rid of the word scale. I think we should just talk about impact. And if I think about the Center for Social Innovation and Ten Cardin, I think the stuff that has happened at CSI and the language and all of that stuff, it's not a replication in Guelph of CSI. It is what Guelph needs, taking some of the concepts that have been beautifully orchestrated by CSI, and it's wonderful language. So for me, scale is about looking at what is the essence of some of the innovations, what is the essence of Evergreen, what is the essence of any of these kinds of organizations, how do we rip it apart and understand it so that it can be replicated in its core in another place, not
Okay, could I throw something with that, though?
Yeah.
KPMG.
Yeah.
Growth.
Yeah, that's
huge company, doing good stuff. So their idea was to grow,
Yeah.
and now with that they're doing. So they're not necessarily exclusive ideas, right? I mean,
Well, and let me just say, I think some ideas and some businesses are better designed for global audience and global reach. And you know, we can argue which ones are which, but you know, the beautiful thing about the internet is that you can have an extremely narrow niche and still have a global audience. That's an amazing ability to impact change. You know, but I do think that there is something happening around it's something to be aware of. I think.
Yeah, but you can also have a huge reach and have a local impact.
Well, that's right, and I think it's about having every solution. If we're all working from our own perspectives towards this idea of shared values, then I think we can. I think there's great opportunities for partnership.
Marketing.
So I would like to market Net Change Week.
Oh, if you get one, I get one.
I'm all about marketing. And so I actually think, Net Change Week, so at MaRS, SiG MaRS, we do a whole program of social tech for social change, and coming up June 6th is Net Change Week. We've talked a lot about use of technology, so this is a really great program. I encourage you to check it out. Okay, marketing, that's what it is. Do I honestly believe that Net Change Week is wonderful? I do. Do I honestly believe it'll help you in social and do social purpose work better? I do. And so that's marketing. Right? I mean, seriously, you can throw it out there, and there are...
Okay, but wait, I'm going to make trouble for you.
That's great.
So Tony says Vodafone, and then the Egyptian Revolution. And I say, no. Yeah. I say, no. The Egyptian Revolution is now run by the Interior Minister of the last 15 years, who was in charge of torture. The generals are still there. They threw out the mascot. Most of the people who ran to that square watched TV. They didn't actually go on the internet, and they weren't twittering. They were just seeing it on TV or hearing from a friend and went. So marketing may be overvalued in a certain way about social change. So where do you really sit? I mean, you like something great, you want to sell it, great, that's your marketing. But what is the role of marketing when you're putting together some alliances that could perhaps be questioned?
What is the role of marketing when you're putting together questionable...
So if you end up with Walmart doing a great marketing job for social change, yeah, but 50% of their employees are still eligible for food stamps, what are we doing?
Right. So I think Walmart is a great example, and far be it from me to be an apologist for Walmart. This is a really funny role for me to have. However, let me tell you a story. So I used to work at Sick Kids, and there was some scientist who came to me and said, we have designed this, this new handlebar on bikes that when they fall, they don't injure kids, because the handlebars going in, causing internal injuries is a huge problem. But Walmart won't buy it. This junior level buyer won't buy it, so no one will manufacture it. That's the power of Walmart. So when Walmart says we're going to reduce packaging along the supply chain, the impact is huge. I think, be a Pollyanna, I think what I heard Tony Pickett say was, once you begin to get them understanding there's a business case, you can co-opt them from the inside. Now we have two choices. We don't shop at Walmart, we condemn them, we say they're bad, evil people, or we try to figure out where there's an alignment, where there's a win-win strategy, and you get in there like the thin edge of the wedge, and you hopefully tip the system from within. And that starts off with making the business case, because they are having an impact. Okay, I don't shop at Walmart, it's not my thing, but there are lots of other people that do.
Okay. Now let's take some questions from anybody from the floor. It's a good panel. You really should ask them stuff.
And you can ask each other stuff too, because there's no way we think we have all the answers.
Somebody over there?
Hi, I'm Hamoon. My day job is at Deloitte. Night job is with a network called the Millennium Network, a group of social change leaders across the country. And as I've been listening throughout the day, Tanya, with you, obviously from the shared spaces perspective and some of the themes you've touched on, and I know Mark and Cheryl, a couple of comments they made throughout the day also on concepts around the need, and Ross earlier around the need to focus on methodical processes around the how of what we do. And how intentional we need to be about that. And Mark talked about the importance of personal relationships and the need to focus on those things. I guess the question that's been running through my mind and has been around, how do we create the incentives in the system so that those things actually get supported and funded? Because when I think about where 95% of the funding goes is when you've got the baby crying and pulling heartstrings. If in the overall grander picture scheme of things, how do we rebalance, or at least put in proper balance, where of initiatives where it is about the what and the tangible outputs of the project are being funded, but at the same time, organizations are being evaluated on how they go about the work they do. So that more and more focus on the process, focus on the people aspect of their work.
All right. Anyone?
We make them so exciting that nobody can avoid them.
Example?
Well, I mean, it's one of the things that, you talked about intentionality and shared spaces, and I want to come back to that, but you know, a good business idea or a good concept will draw the people that it needs to it to help it to succeed. Pathways to education, right? You guys, it's a very, very well-known example of that. I mean, the Center for Social Innovation ourselves, it was astounding. We were able to raise $2 million in under 6 months. We had a solid business case, a really solid business case with real financial and social returns. And I guess, you know, when I'm talking with the entrepreneurs that we have in our spaces, you know, the one thing that I can't say enough is business models, business models, business models. Make it good, make it compelling. Do your homework, get yourself trained up. You know, make sure you've got the skills and you've done your cash flow projections. Like, quite honestly, a lot of this stuff comes back to good business practices. I was talking to Kirk Roberts, who's with the Guelph Regional Innovation Center, and, you know, we were talking, he says, you know, the same thing that social enterprises are up against is the same thing that regular businesses are up against. So, you know, do your homework. But I want to come back to the question of, Bill Young talked about a good theory of change. And one of the things about shared spaces, and I think our friends at 10 Carden are doing some amazing stuff. It's so inspiring to see. But, you know, when we look at how do we bring about, when we look at our theory of change about shared spaces, we're looking at how do we create a platform where organic connections can happen. And it's 1,000 flowers blooming kind of approach. So we really believe that if you create the right platform, the connections will happen and triage will self-organize and it becomes a self-organizing system. I've written a paper called Creating the Conditions for Social Innovation Emergence that talks about the how of that. But now as we become more rigorous, there's a number of different tools and approaches that we can draw on. The Young Foundation has done some really important work, Christian Besson's work at Mind Lab, and it's all around bringing greater intentionality to complex systems. So it's looking at that really big wide world of the opportunity out there and starting to become more strategic about how we, and more strategic and more intentional about the social innovation process. And that is really about Change Labs. It's about why MaRS exists, it's about why CSI exists, it's about interventions from the corporate partners. And I think one of the things that hasn't been given a fair shake here, and Susan McIsaac asked the question that didn't get answered earlier today. We need to create safe spaces that are apart from government just enough that they can be risk-free. So one of the questions is, what are the mechanisms? So building on our conversation at our table with Laura Garton from MRI and others at the table, we have a structural challenge here, which is that we have all of these citizens and nonprofit organizations and corporations who are trying to find ways to socially innovate. And we've got a number of constraints called accountability. And risk aversion that prevent us from being able to experiment. And so the question is, can we find a structural way to create safe spaces, i.e. change labs, that are able to become more intentional about the social innovation process? And I think this is key.
Tim?
Well, some people say that scarcity is the mother of invention or innovation, and I think we're going to find out.
That's right.
And I don't mean just because of the last federal election. I think that North Americans and Europeans are going to have to get used to what it means to have the center of economic power shift to the Pacific. So our days of expecting 4% annual growth, 3%, those days may be over. And what that means in terms of retaining what we believe is our birthright. It isn't, of course, but it's nice to think it is. We've only had it for the last maybe 40 years. Trying to maintain a quality of life that we have every right to expect, in fact, but with fewer resources, or at least fewer resources in the ways that we've seen those resources being used. That's going to be a challenge, and it's going to be a challenge that can only be addressed, in fact, through the kinds of things we've been talking about today. We haven't talked about charity today. We've been talking about social change. If we'd been talking about charity too, I think we would have recognized that the immediate concerns and needs always trump long-term investments. And I think it was useful to have the minister talk this morning about distinguishing between expenditure and investment. Canada devotes billions of dollars to what could only be described as charity, in the sense that it has no long-term change potential. We keep people who we classify as marginal or incomplete, people who have mental health problems, people who have disabilities, people who have addiction problems, you name them. We classify them all as somehow not being able to contribute to our society. And having classified them that way, we make sure that they can't. That has to change. If you think of how we reallocate those billions of dollars that we're now using in entirely unproductive and inhumane ways towards creating systems that allow for people to develop their potential, whatever their potential is, to contribute as citizens in the same way that we all expect to be able to contribute as citizens. In fact, there's plenty of wealth to go around. It drives me crazy when I look at how our infrastructure, both physical and human infrastructure, has been allowed to collapse in one of the richest countries in the world. And then we say we can't afford to do better. Nonsense, of course we can. But there's going to be a painful process of adjustment, because it means taking money away from people who feel that they're entitled to it, or they're responsible for managing it in a certain way, and thinking differently about how we allocate those resources, but allocate them better, smarter. We can do it. But that's the challenge we face now. And I hope that, we'd come back in 3 years' time, and this whole conversation would have taken another quantum step forward. And I think we're perfectly capable of doing it. Just to talk a little bit about the comment Lynn made about how do you take those interesting, promising activities that have demonstrated success and create greater impact, not scale them up, create greater impact. Well, one of the means, and I think probably everyone here has heard about these, is the notion of a social impact bond. It wouldn't solve all or maybe even many problems, but it is an effort to think differently about how we mobilize significant capital, so that instead of organizations like many of the community organizations here struggling to demonstrate that something works, and then at the point where they've shown that it can work, they're cut off. This is to do what business does so well, to say, right, you've got a promising innovation, let's really give you the resources to test whether this is worth scaling up. So the social impact bond is one way of trying to do that. There are other ways as well. But I think that what to me is so promising about this is that it signifies how our minds are beginning to shift away from the real need of keeping people out of misery towards the much more productive and exciting challenge of creating really the conditions of a better life.
All right, another question out there?
Can I reflect on that for just really quickly?
Yeah, if there is one, let's get a mic over there so they can ask it. All right, go ahead.
So just really quickly, in terms of the sick kids analogy, and the crying babies getting most of the money, having fundraised for rape crisis centers and shelters for street kids, I was always completely envious of sick kids who could raise their hand and raise millions of dollars. And then my kid got sick. And I was really thankful that we had sick kids in Toronto. And so I think the kind of charity is emotional, and getting logical about how money goes it's a challenge. But this is about thinking differently about how we generate income. So sick kids also discovered pablum, and there's still a revenue stream from that. So it's about how do we think differently? The Pathways example, Boston Consulting Group, who's speaking tonight, if you're able to stick around, did some really great work with Pathways on demonstrating their social return on investment, showing that for every dollar invested in Pathways, $25 was saved to the system. That helped them get $25 million from the federal government. I also wanted to say that, Tanya talks about community bonds and the work that they did. And yes, they had a solid business case, but they also had Tanya. And MaRS is doing another building, and we've been incredibly successful because we have Ilsa and John Evans. Evergreen Brickworks was successful because Jeff is. So there's a lot about understanding the power of the individual social entrepreneur and backing them as well. And I also want to say that one thing that I was really appreciative of your comment earlier on, but I think it was Churchill, you guys will correct me if I'm wrong, that said you can get an awful lot done if you don't care who gets the credit.
Another question back there.
Hi, my name's Sarah Blackstock. I work with YWCA Toronto. I wish we had spent a bit more time today talking about the failures and the limitations of social innovation. And Tim just said scarcity is the mother of innovation, and I thought that's exactly it. But I'm wondering, because throughout the day I felt maybe part of the reason we're here is because there's a scarcity of democracy. There's something kind of tragic to me that we need a speed dating service to get people engaged in the community. And yet I accept that's where we're at. But there's something kind of tragic about that. There's something upsetting to me that it takes so much to get 3 ministers in the room talking about social innovation. And so I guess I'm just wondering if any of the panelists can talk about that. And what does this mean? Like we've talked about citizen engagement, and we've talked about active citizenship, but we haven't actually talked a lot about democracy and power. And I guess I'm wondering, you know, when you scratch away at all of the packaging here, what we're talking about is getting communities and nonprofits and businesses engaged in our communities and in the act of building communities and building a healthier world. But it's depoliticized in a way that's making me a little uneasy. And so at risk of being the only skeptic in the room, I was wondering if maybe some of the panelists might speak to that.
Anybody want that one? I don't know, I felt bad when you said, you know, I felt like, well, on the other hand, 3 ministers did show up. On the other hand, all these people are here. On the other hand, there is somebody making sure that they speed date so that we can get involved. I mean, an excitement and despair. You're beginning to sound like my wife. All right, here we go. Does anyone want to talk about that one?
Welcome to the world of excitement and despair.
No?
Well, no, I mean,
it's
for
okay
me,
if
it's
it's
such
no.
a big question that I'd love to have that conversation. I'm just not sure whether we've got time to have it. There's a lot to explore and unpack from that, because one is the issue of democracy. And yes, I think there is some frustration that we feel that our democratic system is as feeble as it appears to be at the moment. And yes, we're taking action in part around the edges of it because we're frustrated by the lack of leadership at the political level. On the other hand, we did see today some examples of leadership being exercised. And I would have to say that one of the advantages of living in a federation is that you have a number of governments. And I can tell you, it's not the same across the country. There are some provincial governments which are way out ahead, Ontario being one, British Columbia being one, increasingly also in the Maritimes. And there's some that are not. And that could change with the next set of provincial elections. Who knows? So, I mean, I'm not sure. One could go on for a long time, I think, on this issue.
But I might just say, I don't really believe a lot in democracy. It's been a problem for me because I haven't really seen, I guess it's pretty disempowering, the idea that we have to wait so long for our ability to make change. And I think we are going through a transformation as a society, and it's both despairing and hopeful. But I think we're moving towards co-creation. And I think that that's what the shift is. It's, I mean, I found the last several elections completely disempowering. And I'm not sure that that's the most effective place. It's one place we can have an impact, but I think that there are many others. And I think that with the advent and introduction of the internet and the transformation of the way that we think about collaboration and the opportunities for us to connect with each other across sectors so consistently, so much faster than ever before, I think that the imperative is for us to move that sense of agency that we have had through democracy or through voting into the act of co-creation of the world that we want to see. And to me, that's exciting. And what's really exciting is to look at the people in this room that come from so many different backgrounds and different perspectives that are all interested in the same thing. And I just want to respond. I've been reading the Twitter feed.
Yeah.
I just want to say one thing. There was a perception a little earlier that this was a little bit anti-corporate, and I just want to be really clear. I don't think that that's at all what you're hearing up here. On the contrary, I think what you're hearing is that there are multiple perspectives, views, and assets and resources that we all come from, and that we all need to be able to bring that creativity, those assets, those resources, those frameworks, and those structures to the solution. So I just think it's really important. I don't think we're hearing any, I certainly, you know, I'm a strong believer in the local, but I'm also the strong believer in great corporate partnerships. And I've seen amazing, amazing things happen when we can align our visions around a real solid social outcome. So it's just to say, yeah, it can be a little fruitless, but I also think, yeah, the world's changing, and now we have this incredible opportunity to be more directly engaged, and we need to learn a new tool set to do it.
I just want to say, you better bring your healthy skepticism to this. We need you at the table, because as Tim gave the example of with the microfinance institutions, and I'm going to be talking about this tonight at 6:30 if you're sticking around. Skoll World Forum did a lot of discussions on this, but we need the healthy skeptics at the table, because it's not good enough just to drink the Kool-Aid. But 4 years ago when we did this, we could fill the room with NGOs. We couldn't get anybody from business. Right. We had about 40% NGOs sign up, about 25 business, 25 government, and about 10% academia. So we have come a long way, and there's no way I'm calling you baby.
Well, it's what Roz was also talking about building trust and building relationships and building. It's going to take time, but it has to actually take place, or else the conversation will fall apart quickly. The minute you get your first indicator, I knew those guys were like, boom. Or the corporation is there, and the second word out of the person who showed up's mouth is an ask for money, and that's all they really wanted. Well, you're a cash cow, would you give us some money? And please don't get in our way, we know what we're doing. So it goes both ways, so it'll be difficult. Senor.
Yes, Jeff Cape from Evergreen. I don't know that I have a smaller question than the last one. It's around the change theory, and I guess I wanted to pick up on this issue that change is often inspired by a crisis, or by a leader, or by this notion of relentless incrementalism to move towards evolution. And I guess, you know, looking backwards at the financial crisis, I think there were many of us on the sidelines of the financial crisis cheering the opportunity for substantial change, and how we've wasted a crisis. And Tim, you clearly can reference that with your book. And then this notion of a great leader. Globally, we were all cheering the moment that Obama entered onto the world stage and showed such substantial promise, and yet that's fallen short. And I gather today he's declined to run again in 2012, which I heard today. Am I right or wrong?
Who said this?
Obama's declined to
I
run.
heard today that he was... Oh, is that who it was? Oh, so that's there you go.
Oh, yeah!
That's how rumors start, isn't it?
Jeff, buddy!
I got to get the story right.
There's a bit of a distinction there.
Well,
One's got funny hair.
That would be right.
Oh my God,
Wow.
You had everybody going. It's like, what were we doing in here all day? And where the hell was Twitter?
We need someone to respond on Twitter if you can.
Well, the world has lost a
Jeff
great leader if
pushing
Mr.
some
Trump
big
is not
ideas.
involved. I just get that out of the way now.
Okay, well, there you go. So that's exactly how rumors start. But and the last one is around this relentless incrementalism, and how of the three ideas, leaders, and I think the Obama reference is still relevant because he hasn't proven out to be the way we all hope with regards to substantial systemic change. So which one works? Which idea really flies? It's all three of them, of course, but which one do we put our money behind, so to speak?
So maybe you ask, does big change actually work, or is it just too big? Does it freak people out and they go, you know what are you asking me to change everything for? And that incrementalism you spoke about actually gets things done, right? I mean,
I think the power of the leader isn't that they come up with this brilliant idea. It's that they actually tap into something much more profound. I don't think that we're having this conversation now, and it's so different from 4 or 5 years ago, because we somehow have mobilized new ideas that have spread like wildfire. I think it's because this is a shift in how people think about the role of government, the frustration people feel about problems not being resolved, etc. There are lots of things happening that seem to be just a little below the radar. And it's no surprise that this is happening in Africa, it's happening in Europe, it's happening in Australia. So it's not just a conversation taking place here, it's something about how our capacity to communicate, our ability to try new things because we're frustrated with the weaknesses of so many of our existing institutions and so on. So I think that it's being able to sense where those shifts are about to take place. The leadership comes in actually, articulating and conceptualizing this before it happens, so that you're moving the wave, not following it. So I guess, Jeff, that would be my sense. And those incremental things, those improvements, well, it's one thing to have sufficient pain that you're no longer prepared to stay with the status quo. And it takes a considerable amount of pain before people are ready to move off the status quo. But then there has to be some possibility. There has to be a sense that there are other ways of doing things. Otherwise, where would you move to? Yeah. So those experiments that seem to be so small and so inconsequential actually are the jewels that Tanya was speaking about, that people can say, okay, finally we realize this isn't working. And staying with it is just causing too much destruction. Look what's happening over here. Let's try that. So my very simplistic theory of change is you need to have pain, you need to have possibility, and you need to have pretext. You need something which kind of tips you over. I think many of us hoped is probably the wrong word, but thought that perhaps the financial crisis would be a tipping point. When you see the documentary Inside Job and realize that all the people who were in positions of power and authority before the crisis are still there after the crisis, you know that tipped us nowhere. But nevertheless, we need something that actually, the catalyst that suddenly creates the moment when these things come together, and as one of the slides earlier said, what seemed impossible to imagine suddenly seems inevitable in retrospect.
Another question?
Yes, I'm John Labatt. My background is in the corporate sector. And I wanted to touch on this marketing question because I find that the creative juices in this room seem to sort of go away when the word marketing comes up. And my background is in business development and marketing. So I thought I would give you a different way of looking at marketing, perhaps. We talk a lot today about language and how language is a problem when you're trying to communicate across sectors. And it's true. And within companies, it's also a problem. Marketing can be viewed in a positive light and in a less positive light. For me, marketing isn't just advertising, selling something truthfully or not, or all that sort of thing. For me, marketing is explaining how a product meets the need of someone that is looking for that particular product, or explaining how that product or service is something they need, though they might not recognize it. So what I'm thinking is you could reframe the discussion that marketing is in fact a way to bridge that language gap between sectors and within companies in such a way that you can all be discussing the same thing, social innovation, in a way that everyone understands and everyone gets excited, and then you see some momentum start, and then perhaps the big change happens.
A new idea for the public good, things like that, right? Because social innovation, this is all I care about. It's because if you can't get people to understand what you're talking about, none of this is going to matter. So that idea, I think, needs more work, right? It needs the Tony Pigotts, it needs the people in the world that market things to help out so that we make sure that makes sense. Building partnerships. Remember, we were talking about what's going to be the title. And we sort of went through all these permutations and cross-sectoral, and I thought, I really don't know what that means. It has lost anything that doesn't really speak plain English. So I think in all of the endeavors, if you can't speak plain English, you know you're wrong. If somebody goes, I don't get it, stop. Don't go into paragraph 3 of explaining what it was, because it doesn't matter anymore. It either hits you in the gut or it doesn't, because there's a lot of things that are competing for you and for your thoughts. You know, one of the thoughts I also have is this idea that Raj Patel put forward in his Value of Nothing book, which was that the discontent that may spur the change is that more and more populations feel that profit has been privatized and risk has been socialized. And that financial collapse you spoke of was perhaps for a moment that idea come true. So now I'm going to pay the bill and they're going to walk away with the money. But it's kind of blurping along. It's not really a straight line, but I don't think change is a straight line. So perhaps those are some of the things. We had another microphone back there. Somebody was, there you go.
Hi.
Stand up, sir.
Hi, my name is Ramesh. I'm just a volunteer here.
Oh, there is no such thing as just a volunteer.
I guess the question that the question that I had is, what does social innovation look like in rural areas? What does social innovation look like in immigrant communities? And I think that's those are incredibly important questions, because it's something that I don't think most people here, including myself, are equipped to answer, particularly the rural aspect part. And I'm a little bit, as much as we talk about social innovation, we still live in political realities. And I think that in much of Ontario, social innovation is a foreign concept. And I'd just like to hear more about how do we make this more relevant to more Ontarians.
Okay, good question. Who wants the first bite of that apple?
Tim does.
Well, a lot of social innovations in rural areas, particularly in the far north, have to do with the challenge of providing services to a population which is very scattered. So telehealth, for example, is a way of meeting the needs of people in remote communities. New ways of delivering education, health, and so on are being created because the traditional ways are simply not workable. The population is too small and the distances are too great. Some people may have seen, not too long ago, there was an article in The Economist introducing the concept of fab labs. Fab, not standing for fabulous, as I thought, but fabrication labs. And this is now spreading in Europe, and the first one is opened in Quebec. This basically, these are, if you can think of it as kind of three-dimensional printers, where somebody can have an idea, create a blueprint as to what that would look like, which is turned into a computer program and fed into a very sophisticated and elaborate printer, which actually produces a 3D replica of what it is you've created. You wouldn't believe it were possible, except that it was in The Economist, so I guess, apart from their occasional tongue-in-cheek story, but these are actually happening. And this, means that people in small communities, and these are not very expensive. Curiously enough, the ones in Europe that are now being used are in the neighborhood of $50,000. But it allows you, if you're creative and you come up with an idea and you're in a small village in Poland, you actually can sketch it out, have it turned into something which is reproducible, and go to your local fab lab and actually produce it. So what happens to mass production? What happens to the notion of cheap offshoring of manufacturing to China and so on? I mean, all of this gets turned on its head. I think this is extraordinary. I mean, this is technical innovation, but with it comes a whole stream of social innovations as well.
A short thought, and then I want everybody to have a final thought, and we'll go to the wiki after that.
So to answer your question, Ramesh, I think the question of what does social innovation look like within immigrant communities and rural communities, the answer is we need to ask them and have that conversation. And my experience with all of this is that people are waiting to be given permission. And I guess this is a concept I'm still in shock about, because I've never been very good at asking for permission. And so I just want to say to you all, permission is granted, right? You have permission to socially innovate. And please spread the message, because ultimately, I guess this is one of these really interesting things around where it came when Minister Murray was talking about authority and linking authority to decision making and how we're structuring our relationship with government. And so I guess this is one of the most profound things I think we can do, is to say you have permission to try something new. We're not exactly sure how you're going to do it yet. Maybe it's a fab lab, a change lab, maybe it's within your nonprofit organization allocating time for innovation, maybe it's within a corporate partnership structure. We're not exactly sure the tactics, but the opportunity exists now to start to play with these ideas and to try to get ahead. And to Jeff's question, I think we need to get ahead of the game. I think we were all just a little shocked at the economic crisis, and I think it kind of hit us from blindsided. And I think one of the things that we need to do is we need to ready ourselves, build the networks, build the social capital, build the relationships, and be ready to jump on the next good crisis in order to have that slow burn of solutions that will position Ontario as a leader in social innovation.
The ideas that are lying around when the crisis hits. Yeah. All right, some final thought?
Just on that last point and on change, I don't know, what I've observed in rural communities, social innovation is happening. I'm not sure they would call it that, though. And what you see in smaller communities, whether it's in Canada or overseas, in Africa or other developing countries, you see communities really coming together and identifying needs of the community and then thinking about, well, how do we go about and make it happen or fulfill that need? So I mean, what I've seen is that there's a lot of creativity and there's a lot more coming together than we'll find in urban areas. And that's something that I found incredibly exciting to see. And from a change perspective, I mean, having gone through organizational change, it seems to be one foot on the gas, one foot on the brake almost, because on the one hand, people complain that change isn't happening fast enough. Yet when you experience rapid change, then people also complain it's happening too quickly and we don't have time to absorb it and we're losing people and the change isn't sustainable. So I think it's really about finding that balance and not being terribly impatient about things, recognizing that you need to have the grand vision and you need to have people buying into the vision and getting excited about the vision and understanding what their role is along the way. And whether we're talking about folks from different sectors, whether we're talking about citizens, everybody understanding what's the long-term benefit and how is it that we can all participate and really sustain the change that happens and not get too impatient when it is incremental, because I think that's what helps us to learn along the way. Then we can adjust and evolve, and that's what really helps things take root.
Tim?
I think we're living through a pretty scary time. If people don't think that our whole society is at risk, then they clearly aren't taking into account anything that scientists and thinkers are telling us. On the other hand, I think it's also an extraordinary time because it just gives rise to so many possibilities. But I think we're fooling ourselves if we think that the downside isn't that people will become either so devoid of hope or so angry about what they view as a loss of things that they feel they deserve, that we risk creating something here which would be totally antithetical to our values and the beliefs that we have, certainly in this room. So I think it's really important for us to constantly remind ourselves of the incredible resource that imagination is, a renewable resource, thank goodness, and how creative people are, and therefore how hopeful. I mean, this is so exciting precisely because unlike, God, the dreary decades of the 70s and 80s and 90s where nothing was changing, and it was a real uphill struggle to talk about social change. Now, it's in, as Matsky would say, it's in the water supply. We're conscious of it. There's a bubbling up of ideas and creativity. I think it's the most exciting time in the world to be active in the work that we're doing, but we have to keep reminding people that this is a great opportunity and there's plenty to be hopeful about, because there's also plenty to be anxious about. And we want to be sure that our society doesn't turn over to the dark side while we struggle on saying, but look at all this great social innovation going on. So I guess what I take away from today is just another reminder of how exciting it is to be with people like the people in this room and hearing about all the great opportunities that we're in the process of creating.
Allison?
In 2007, I walked into MaRS. It was a fundraiser for the Sick Kids Foundation. And I went, what is this place? One. And number two, how do I figure out how we use it for social purpose work? It's a place about innovation. It's a place about science. It's a place about business. And now it's a place about social innovation because of folks like you. I think we have a real opportunity. We are across the street from government, but not of government. We are around the corner from Bay Street, but not of Bay Street. We are located in community. I want this place to be a neutral space where people can come and think and learn and challenge, which is, I'm so thrilled we had the question about the healthy skepticism. I want this to be a place where we can come together and figure stuff out, because I'm telling you, we don't have the answer. There's no way that any of us would say that we have the answer, but we do know, we are convinced that collectively we can figure it out. I want to thank you again for coming. This has been a quick process to put this together, but only quick because there was a short timeline. There was a lot of long sleepless nights, and I'm very pleased that you've all stuck around, so thank you very much.
Thank you to all four of you as well. All right, you're free to go.